Welcome back to Too Much Music. Today, we want to talk a bit about big tech and how it is poisoning everything.
Poisoning the well. Yeah, this is a topic that's near and dear to both Greg and me, has been for some time. And we both have quite a bit to say about it. So this may end up being a multi-parter.
I think it will. And it does really relate to creating and being in your studio and getting yourself together and even knowing yourself, because we're going to talk a lot about digital distraction and what it really means and how to escape it, ways you can create sanctuary within your studio space, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about, when was the first time that this topic ever even came up for me? So I am an elder millennial. So I grew up without the internet, but started having the internet in high school. So it's things like AIM and, all that.
You called it AIM?
Early. Oh, yeah, AIM. AIM?
Yeah.
Instant Messenger?
AIM.
Okay, so, at that time, obviously AOL was the corporate internet, but they didn't have nothing on what we got now. So when was the first time I really, kind of noticed that things on the internet were not working for me? And right. It wasn't some glorious, giant global community, but there was something else going on.
Of Napster.
Yeah. It was actually well after Napster. For me, it was, I didn't join Facebook super early. I lived in Philadelphia, I think from like 2003 to like 2009 or so. And I didn't get on Facebook while I was there because I knew everyone and I just saw them in person. I never even considered that I might want to be on Facebook. I think I had a MySpace account or whatever that I didn't use. But then when I moved to go to graduate school to a different city, I moved to Montreal, and I missed my friends in Philly, and they were all like, you should get on Facebook. We're all on there. And so I got on there, and I thought, this will be so great. I'll keep in touch with my friends. And for a while, that's exactly what it was. It was really fun. I had a good time posting, and chatting with people. But I remember I started to notice that I was feeling like I needed to go check it in a very strange way.
Did you have an iPhone?
I did not like
Did you have a phone that would have an app?
At that time, I don't think I had that yet. I think I had that later. I think at that time I still just had like a Nokia, whatever. So no, I did not have a smartphone. So I was, looking at it on my computer and going to grad school, and I would be like working on a paper, and this was a PhD at McGill. This was like serious academic shit. And I'm like working on a paper, and I would find my brain like wanting to go to a Facebook tab. And I was very upset by this immediately. I was like, no, this is not stand. And I just quit Facebook like immediately. I mean, at that time, I actually did not delete my account, which I should have, but I just stopped using it.
There was a whole pause thing,
completely.
and people would do that regularly, right? They would pause their stuff.
Yeah, I don't even think I told anybody or did. I think I just stopped using it and just let it sit there, for a long time. But it was, it was the first time that I actively noticed, okay, something's wrong with this. And obviously, over the years, that's gotten a lot better, and Facebook is not addictive at all now.
It's fine.
What about you? What was your first experience with that kind of thing?
Well, I'm older. So, when I was in college, we were using a VAX machine, a Unix machine with a terminal that you signed in. Yeah, it's a whole thing. Okay. So we'll skip all that and just say that by the time I'm in your world in Philly, when we met and we're working together, I had been working in the startup world, building the startup that you and I co-founded. And then, everybody was just frantically impressed with and going after ways of targeting people, like having access to customers directly, changed the whole B2C thing, of course. And then the fact that they were brand new phones, it's hard to imagine this, but you could code for those devices and deliver things to them through push and all of that sort of thing. Anyway, it was a whole new world. And so I learned about it all through there. And so I was seeing the back end of it where people were very focused on the attention and the ways of grabbing your attention. There wasn't that much, competition for it for your attention.
So this was just to contextualize this, because I think it's a really interesting place to start. You were co-working when you
Yep.
founded that startup at a place called Indie Hall in Philadelphia, which I
Yeah,
believe
still
is
there.
still there. And at that time, it's a really cool spot with lots of really smart people. And at that time, everybody, like you said, was just obsessed with the startup world. They were looking for VC money. They were looking to make their app. Most of the people at Indie Hall, I think, were like really into iOS, which was very
right.
new, and they were doing
They call
iOS
themselves
apps.
Cocoa Heads.
Cocoa Heads, that's right. Yeah. And so I kind of walked out of academia into that scene with, and co-founded that startup with you a little bit. And that for me was like, I had no idea that any of that even existed. I just, I'd used computers in the past for music, and that was, music and writing papers.
Yep.
That was it. And so it was really eye-opening and kind of crazy to me to see this whole world of people who were obsessed. And what they were all starting to talk about was, I remember people starting to talk about data.
It was big data. It was the birth of big data, and that was the thing.
Right.
Early days on that front. But what could you do? With
right. Everybody had their Hadoop.
Everybody
startup.
was visualizing Twitter, free data from Twitter, and they were aghast to learn that you could just grab free data that everybody approved to be used, and you could determine you could determine when someone had cancer, knowing only where they posted from and when they posted. That's all you needed to know. 2 data points could tell you things like they show up at the cancer treatment ward regularly at this time. They take these photos. They share them here, right? So that's a strange example I just gave. But what I'm saying is, it's a personal thing that you suddenly could get out of almost no data, and people were pretty floored by that, and a lot of them were excited. And we call those people sociopaths.
Yeah, those are people that just smell money. They're like money sniffing dogs or whatever. They're just sniffing for money everywhere they go. And it turned out that this was, they were right. This was going to be the most valuable money making opportunity. You can call it a scam. You can call it an opportunity. I don't know. We'll call it a racket. This is going to be the largest racket the world has ever seen, and in fact is continuing today to grow. So let's take a little turn then. So I think everyone kind of has some sense of that, right?
Yeah. We've all taken the journey together, and so here we are. And it's much worse than I think even a lot of the people had hoped it might be. And one of the ways that I know that personally is I had a sense of this. So you can look to past episodes to hear our story, but we moved away from the big city, and moved up into the mountains in New Hampshire. That's where I live now. And so when you're disconnected from all that hustle and bustle and daily grind, you value different things and whatnot. So at some point I started winding all that down. I didn't really need to connect with people that I had been connected with in those ways. And the point is, when I finally just shut that shit off, my life changed. My brain changed. Yeah. And I started to recognize myself again in ways that they were profound. Now, it took some weeks of no feeds. It took several weeks, maybe even like 6 weeks total. But in 2 weeks, I noticed. What I noticed was that feeling of grabbing your phone or whatever. What I noticed was I was sitting going, what should I do now? What do I want to do now?
Yes. Yes, that question that goes away when the answer is always obvious, that you look at your phone. I think that's the key to all of this in my mind. Yeah, so let's talk about what you and I each did, and we obviously talked about this a lot along the way, but we both did have kind of separate journeys, and we've helped each other. It's been really, for me, a big deal to have you as somebody who's, got a similar perspective to me, but knows about some different things, and, has some different priorities. And I have found that, that little tiny community of two to actually be, just super important to allowing me to pursue this what I would call freedom or autonomy, mental autonomy. So maybe let's talk about how we did that. Like what were the concrete steps that we each took?
I know we both at one point started deeply researching how to de-Google our lives. That was a whole thing, de-Googling. I've de-Googled.
I know that word makes it sound so ridiculous. Just the sound of de-Googling. It's as dumb as it sounds, people.
Oh, I was going to say, when we did that, we had to come up with solutions to. Our first worry was work, dealing with clients and such. But then the second thing was we had to come up with personal solutions that would replace a lot of the convenience that we had found with Google Calendar, of course. The ability that your phone takes photos, you rely on those, actually. They become an important part of your life. They're not just a nice to have, actually. So when you do that, you've got to store them somewhere. You've got to be able to access and, get to them, and they've got to be secure. So there were things like that we had to both look into how we would do that.
Right. Yeah. When there's, the ready, and I think stepping back even one more step, why Google? Why is that the company that people tend to focus on when they're doing this? And the reason is actually as simple a reason as it could be.
I was going to say,
they're the biggest.
Is that a real question?
They're the worst.
They own the internet.
Yeah, they're the biggest. They're the worst. Yeah, they own the internet, and their tendrils are so everywhere that if you can separate yourself from that, you're probably in pretty good shape, actually. It's not that they're the only company, using data to do nefarious things, but and to sort of take over our brains, but they're one of the largest. And the other thing is to note that neither Greg nor I, we both were never really in the Meta Facebook system very much. We both had accounts at different times, but neither of us was that wasn't a huge part of our lives. So that wasn't. I know for some people that's very, very difficult. They've built up these huge networks of people and use Facebook or use Instagram for all kinds of important things in their lives, and I recognize that that's just something we didn't have to deal with, so that's worth noting. But I think what I was looking for when I started the process, the concept of privacy was really not at the front of my mind. It has since become more at the front of my mind with all this stuff as I've researched it and read about it and thought a lot.
Let's address why right there, because I think a lot of people will be familiar with some of the details around this, but let's talk about why privacy matters. Because it's one thing to say, you and I hear this all the time from our friends and family and whatnot, which is, well, I like the ads, they help me, or I never would have found that motivational speaker and bought that book if I hadn't seen them on Instagram or whatever. They feel like there's a real value being delivered, but what?
It shows me all the memes that I like the best, and then I can laugh about them with my friends. That's something
they're
I hear all the
touchstones,
time.
just like TV sitcoms used to be in the 90s and stuff like that. So they're touchstones for social interaction too. So those are all things that are real. But why does privacy matter then? Who cares if they know who I am and I'm not doing anything wrong?
Right, and this is such a huge conversation. I think Edward Snowden said something about this that has really stuck with me and resonated with me over the years. I think he put it much better than this, but he said something like, not caring about your privacy rights because you don't feel like you have anything to hide is like not caring about free speech because you feel like you don't have anything to say. It's a fundamental part of a society that has agreed on some certain things, right? We have a social contract, and privacy is part of that. And to me, the fact that corporations have convinced us that that's not important is one of the most insidious and nefarious things I can even imagine. The fact that people defend that we don't even want it or need it. And, not to get too political on everybody here, but, these companies are now, you can almost consider them as one with the federal government of the United States. And in fact, it's so true, this is not just fringe people saying this anymore. Like, governments in Europe are detaching from American tech companies because of this, right? Because it becomes a national security issue at some point, right? If the government is
I would say privacy is power, personal power. That's a phrase I've heard, and I think it's very, very true and demonstrably so. It's power in your own life. As I mentioned in my own detoxification process, you become familiar again with your brain, and your brain will ask you questions, and it will sit idle and say, well, what do I want now? What do I actually want to do? You know what I haven't done in I don't know, 5 years is this. And it's a little embarrassing when you realize, like, I haven't picked up a book to just sit with for a long time.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So things like that change. So you gain power there because you're going to have agency when you have your brain back. And
yeah, I think it's interesting. Privacy is like the abstract concept that's kind of hard. It's hard for us to value it because it is very abstract. But whether you value your privacy or not, I suspect you probably do value your own mind and your own ability to think about things, which is where you're going with this. And the natural, essentially what the internet has become is mental engineering. It's just trying to change our behavior, right? In its own image. It's trying to create what it calls engagement, which only means just keep scrolling to the next thing. Just don't ever leave the screen. That's engagement. That's the goal. And so that's what all the algorithms are designed. Everybody knows this at this point. It's not, and you'll say this. One of the things I've experienced, I try to talk to people in my life, like in real life, about this all the time. And it's been difficult because I think a lot of people, feel very invested in these, especially the social media stuff, what they feel are, online communities. And for great reason, they feel invested in this, right? But it really is demonstrably true and researched and known that these online communities that are run by big tech companies are hurting people by and large.
Stealing your time.
Are there benefits?
They're stealing your time. Yeah. They're stealing your agency. They're stealing your own thoughts. They're encroaching in ways that that exert influence on you that you will not be aware of. This is, I find something helpful here, which is to instead of vilifying, right? Because no one's intending. This isn't the intention. This was never the intention. It's not. I don't believe it's the intention of individuals. I think what's happened is the business model has become entrenched. I mean, this is well documented, and because of that, it has to continue. It has to survive, and for all sorts of dumb and complicated and simple, straightforward reasons. And so it's adapted itself like a virus, actually, to our behavior patterns and the weaknesses in our evolutionary, state. Yeah, tendencies. So all that said, I don't think it's helpful to vilify. You're not vilifying. I'm just saying I don't think it's helpful to look and be like Mark Zuckerberg. Okay, this is just.
I mean, I'm actually pretty happy to vilify.
Oh, you can vilify the human or the individual if however much you know.
Yeah, I don't want to vilify. I'm not vilifying all the thousands and thousands of people that have worked at these companies for sure, but. I do think there's, and this doesn't really matter. I agree with you.
The tech that I developed over so many years and gave my life to, and that you then built the company with me, we spent a lot of years. We built that tech was used to track emotion and mood in real time through music.
And sell ads. There's no doubt it was used to sell ads. Yeah.
No.
Not by us, but
when it got out of our hands, it became a tool that people used to track your mood based on the music you picked, and then sell that data in real time to provide ads. So we were part of that, not intentionally, but again, that's exactly the point. Yeah. Like we had all the best intentions with the tech.
People just doing their jobs, doing cool shit, trying to think through problems, trying to optimize. This is one of those many examples that comes up to me all the time now of like how optimizing is just not always. It's not always the best move. I'm a natural optimizer, right? Like it's what my brain does. I remember as a child there was this book called Cheaper by the Dozen, and it's about this family in the 20s, and the dad is what they call him an efficiency engineer. And he goes in, factories were new, and he would go into these factories and help them, make the factories more efficient. And I was obsessed with that. I was obsessed with that guy's job. Like, this is a very natural state to me to want to engineer efficiency. I think over the years, and it has become clear to me that there are limits to where that should be in a human life.
Specifically with creativity, in my view.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that you and I have both done our whole lives is we have created things. And we've done it independently in collaboration, right? For projects, for people, all sorts of different ways in which we've done this. But as you do that, as you spend a life doing that, you find that being efficient, it has benefits when you're building product. And your creative output can be product. It sometimes must be product. And sometimes it really shouldn't be. And sometimes, probably more often than not, you actually have to blend those two things. You need to be building a product. You need to be clear and efficient, but you also need to build room into that process for invention, for novelty, for something that goes, oh, wow, that's a little different. And I think what matters to me here about this on the tech front, there's many things. I mean, in our personal lives, those are all personal choices, but on the studio front, the tech stuff and the feeds essentially that take away agency, they affect your own personal ability to have that process and to control it in detrimental ways. I don't see anything positive about that. If your goal is to be the most creative and efficiently creative human that you can be, I don't see that there are benefits to those feeds. You need your agency, is what I think, and you need your skills.
Well, and your attention, I think those two things go together in such a deep way mentally. The feeds are designed by nature to grab attention. That's what every single bit of stuff in them does. That's what it's all doing, for better or for worse. And yeah, I mean, if you're a creative person and you really need to sit and let your mind do its own thing. That's I would say 90% of creativity is letting your mind be itself. And if it's not itself, you're going to be severely handicapped in what you can do creatively. And I was feeling that even without Facebook, even without Instagram, just for me, it was just having algorithmic feeds on my phone in various ways, different news apps or whatever, like just things that were sort of designed to keep my, with the infinite scroll, right, to keep my brain. And what I found was I was not able to write. Songwriting stopped happening because songwriting is a really interesting case for me because that's, for my world, the purest form of like personal creativity that I experience. And it only happens when I'm alone, and it only happens when I feel a freedom and a space, mentally to do it. And it comes, it's the classic, like you've heard a lot of people describe it, it's the classic situation where it just comes out of nowhere and you better grab it. And if you are not paying attention when it comes out of nowhere, it will just disappear. It's just gone. And that's what happened to me for quite some time. I really didn't write songs. And it was devastating for me. I didn't really put it all together as a whole picture for quite a while, but what had happened is, I just found myself so distracted that process didn't happen. I didn't know that was why. I felt bad about myself. I felt bad about my own creativity, like there was something wrong with me. And there was something wrong with me. I was letting other people take away my agency. And as soon as I stopped that, it turns out I could always write songs. Like it never actually stopped. I just didn't do it for that reason.
Yeah. By the way, there are military jets. This is maybe tangentially relevant to our topic. Military jets doing exercises above me, and that might sound strange, but I'm in the White Mountains. I'm right at the edge of the White Mountains, and there are military bases here on the East Coast, White Mountains of New Hampshire. And every time the military is active in any way, they do these drills in the White Mountains. It's a thing, and because there's no people there, which is why.
Yeah.
So I'm here where I can't see people. I don't see lights at night except for the stars. I don't hear anyone ever except for just animals. And yet, when these military jets come, I think it probably went through the noise cancellation because they are so loud and they fly so low. It's bananas what they're doing. And anyway, that's relevant to our discussion because it's worth noting that the political strife that we all are experiencing, whatever side you're on, the mess that is global now, wouldn't, in my view, and I'm going to cite some things here in a minute to shore this up, but in my view, this wouldn't be the case without these algorithms, without these feeds, without the power of what these things have done to us and the way we have dependent on them. We don't really have a reliable set of ways to get news. And back in the early teens, like around 2010 and 12, there were academic studies that were being done on the effect of these things. And they were even in Australia, I remember seeing a specific study about the power to influence who you might vote for. And they were doing it in regional elections and things like this. And of course, and around 2016, there were more, like people have been doing this for a while. But the point of that is academic researchers knew and could show without fail, very confidently, that if I feed you the information that I want to feed you, I can influence your worldview and I can change who you're going to support, politically speaking. And this matters. This is a lot of how we are in the position that we're in. And again, it doesn't matter what side you're on. It matters that there is a tremendous amount of hate and strife and ugliness and all sorts of things that are happening to it. And that's part of what I'm trying to show, that it's such a destructive force that it has changed our environment. We're not working from a ground level that we would recognize. Certainly as middle-aged and older people, as I am, we don't recognize this. The things that we take for granted and assume about how people think, the process they might have in making a decision, those things aren't fair to assume anymore because everyone, it's almost like a virus has taken over, like a zombie virus has taken over their brains, and they're not thinking clearly, or they certainly aren't thinking in ways that based on information that they can really rely on.
And I think to sort of say it in a different way and add a little spin, I guess. The thing that I always think about that is that, I'm not looking back like the 60s were some golden age of, human autonomy, because I don't think they were. I mean, I think the 20th century and the early 21st century, before the rise of big tech and social media brainwashing, had its own form of brainwashing. People were trying to brainwash each other, for quite some time.
I will put a pin in this and come back, but I want to just share something about that. I just heard this morning as I was showering, which is I was listening to the Sonic State podcast and Music Tech podcast, and Charlie Clouser was on. Do you know who he is? Well, he's
no.
a film score composer. He did all the Saw movies, but he was also in the 90s. He was an important part of Trent Reznor's band, and he toured with Nine Inch Nails. And anyway, the reason that matters is they were talking about touring and some of the experiences they had, and it's very well known in the music industry that it was the number of SM58s. And the number of DX7s, brown DX7s that were trashed in Nine Inch Nails shows is like a legendary thing. Trent Reznor would just about every night, wherever they were going, would destroy. They used the DX7s. They would tour with tons of these, and you could go into any music shop, wherever they were, you can get new ones because they were so ubiquitous, right? But they would use them as controllers because they would then destroy them with whatever they had on stage. They would break them up into little pieces, and so they would end up being bloody and cut up and whatever and all this mess. And what he there are lots of videos on YouTube about this, but what Charlie Clouser was saying was that one of the reasons that they picked the DX7 was that they were it was like their little private secret rebellion to that goddamn digital little bell piano sound, that they hated it. Yeah, they
Fucking
hated
sound.
it. They were all about the grit, the grime, the dirt, the dark. Blah. So instead of
Yeah.
to privately rebel, they would take the sweetest sounding synth that Disney would use in in The Little Mermaid and just beat the shit out of it on stage. And but my point,
All right. That's
it's
extremely
so 90s, the
90s. Just
apathy.
want to
There you
say.
go. But it reminded me of like Frank Zappa who would go on tirades about Toto. Now, think what you
Yeah.
want about Toto. They built a fuck of a product and almost nothing. Given the technology and the whatever, people were playing, they were skilled players, and the sound.
Have you heard the synth solo in Rosanna, for God's
Exactly. There you
sake?
go. That's 3 cents, and one was the CS80, I think. I mean, my God. I mean, no,
All right,
there's real
sorry.
skill there, is all I'm trying to say. And so just shitting on
Yeah, I
Michael
really
Bay
like
because
Toto.
it's kind of bad drama is whatever. Like you try to build a Transformers Enterprise or whatever. Like, there's a lot of skill there, and it's worth. But the point is, people want to take sides. They want to hate on something, and they want to stand for something, and
Yeah.
that means there's going to be an other. I mean, I'm not saying anything revolutionary or unknown, but
Well, actually, though, I mean, I think, and we have no we have no standing to really go into this, but I do think this is a very interesting thing to think about
Yeah.
today because, the othering that's going on by everyone is so intense, and it's
that's why I shared
overwhelming.
the story, and I said I'm going to put a pin, and you can go back
Yeah.
to what you were saying. Please do, because I'm saying that before all of this tech, way before it, people
Yeah.
still felt this way. People still behaved this way. There are reasons to do it for real. When the world united against Nazi Germany, that was a
Yeah.
threat that we don't understand and we can't know. But
interestingly, even those motivations there were no pure motivations on
Yeah.
anyone's part there. It was all, it feels historically like that's true. But even at the time, it was very complicated.
even with the Soviet Union. But my point was that if you take middle class, comfortable people like Trent Reznor from Cleveland, Ohio, who worked in a music store, like if you take this regular kid and he's gonna find something to hate on and he's gonna act on it and do so. It's a natural state that we have that's now amplified, I think, is all I was trying to share and just support your point there about.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot, I feel like there's increasingly more to be angry about. And I get why people are angry. I get why Trent Reznor was angry.
Angry
frankly.
at the Little Mermaid.
It also feels good to be angry. I'm not a hardcore music person. Like I have generally in my life avoided any kind of hardcore music. Like it hurts my mind most of the time. Like Nine Inch Nails, I can appreciate, a lot about that band and a lot about what Trent Reznor does, but I just basically can't listen to it. It's like sandpaper for me. But I had this one experience one time, and it really made me understand like what it is about feeling hardcore that people like. This is going to sound so stupid. I was playing this show. I was in Portland, Oregon. I was really young, and I had cut the end of my finger off, like chopping garlic. I still have a scar, and like a good portion of it. And then I had a show where I had to play guitar, and it was my right hand index finger. I'm a right-handed, so it's the finger that. And I played with a pick at the show because I really couldn't use my fingers, so I played with a pick. And I had a Band-Aid on or whatever. But at some point, I was playing really hard, and the string went through, and it just re-sliced it off. And I just started bleeding.
And you were like look at this!
I felt so powerful. And the audience was freaking, like they saw it because it was really a lot of blood. Like it was not subtle, and it was getting on everything. OSHA was coming in like
your little hand wound. Just imagine how powerful you'd feel if there were hundreds of thousands of people screaming at you while you beat the shit out of a DX7.
Dude, I can see how that would feel very empowering. But yeah, I mean that kind of anger and that kind of like. I think music is actually a really interesting outlet for that. For me, that's not what it is. But I see why. Boy, this is really
taken a turn. Well, it's okay. This is a two-parter, and we should wrap up in a minute so that we can do a two-parter because I want to pull it back to, the studio stuff and the process of creating And we can do that here in a minute, but yes, it has taken a turn. That's what we do. That's what everybody signs up
That's
for.
what we
All
do here.
20 of you viewers. That's what everybody signs up for. The turns we take.
Do we even have a way to sign up? I don't think we do.
You can subscribe to the podcast, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel.
You
As a matter of
subscribe.
fact, go ahead and hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button.
Oh, you know what? I actually hope that you're listening to this via an RSS feed, which is one of the vestiges of the old school internet that I love so much. And it's how podcasts work. If you don't know, this podcast distribution is, it's just an accident because podcasts used to be so laughed at by corporate tech. They never really took them over until they suddenly became so popular that it was too late. Like they couldn't change the underlying technology. So they're built on this very open protocol called really simple syndication, and like that's why you can listen to this anywhere you get your
remember
podcasts.
back in
So
the early
hopefully you
startup
do.
days, I met so many startup people, mostly dudes, and there was one dude who was so obsessed with RSS. He would have slide decks where he would talk about the billions and billions, because the phone, what he didn't imagine was that the phone would change and become more technically advanced. But he imagined like, we can now just pipe, radio is gone, TV is gone. We can just pipe it all into RSS and just feed everybody everything. And he would talk about the billions of people he was going to reach this way. And so he wanted to build a streaming platform that would do this.
Two things I know about that guy. One, he's awesome, and I would love to hang out with him. Two, he never really made any money because you can't. I mean, for me, I feel the same. I honestly feel that way today about RSS. I think like you could do almost all of the things that anyone does
That's
on the
like being
internet.
excited about HTML. I mean, you can be and you should be, but you're not going to build a business on HTML.
Well, but that's my point. And if there's one point of this episode for me, it's that I honestly feel, and you know, if there were, you know, I'd love to have further conversations with different people about this, because I think a lot of people would probably be upset that I'd say this, but I honestly feel at this point in our history that making art and making money doing it are almost mutually exclusive. I don't know how to do it. I'll put it that way. And I don't even wish I did at this point.
Let's
like
start there.
I
mean, like on our two-parter here, on our part 2, because that's beautiful and brilliant. I think unless you're grandfathered in some way, and by grandfathered, I mean you had a career beforehand and you had a role that was monetizable beforehand, or you had an audience base, right?
So if you're Radiohead and you can put out a brilliant pay what you will scheme and everybody goes and buys your records anyway, no shit they do.
That was touted as a revolution in crowdsourced whatever, and all these poor bastard little bands would be like, I'll do pay what you want, and they did, and they were
and everybody was like, oh shit, I want to pay nothing.
Thanks bro.
Thanks Tom York for your brilliance. All right. Yes, let's wrap it up here, and we'll talk more about this in our next episode.
Thank you for joining us. Thanks for taking the twists and turns of too much music. Yeah, that's what we do. All right, we will talk to you soon. Again, part 2 coming up. Bye, everybody. Bye.